The Christian teaching that we know now is greatly distorted and has almost no relation to what Jesus Christ taught. Modern Christianity is a Jewish counterfeit created by Saul, called the 13th Apostle Paul. 13th Apostle, an apostle from the devil. But as you understand, Paul was not an apostle. He did not follow Jesus, and the Holy Spirit did not descend on him. Moreover, he never knew or saw Jesus. At first, he was engaged in persecuting Christians. So who called him an apostle? But his letters occupy a significant part of the New Testament. So, the Christianity that we now know is a heresy created by Paul. Many people understand this, see the perversion and illogicality, and therefore move away from the faith, becoming atheists instead of seeking the true faith. Faith is a natural state of man that distinguishes us from animals. Without faith, it is impossible to live in harmony. Without faith, wars, violence, and injustice will continue. As long as the people have a single faith, they live in harmony. As soon as faith is lost, unrest and revolutions begin, as for example what happened in 1917. Paul's perverted Christianity is essentially a defilement, where only fragments of true Christianity are preserved. And even the Gospels were written later than the letters of Paul and under his influence. Jesus says all people are equal. Paul writes that all authority is from God and slaves must obey their masters. Jesus says that the will of God is the unity of all people, and as a reward, unity with God. Paul writes that the main goal is that Jesus died for us, and we are already forgiven. Jesus teaches that spiritual life is a joyful union with God. Paul writes that the reward will be there after death. Otherwise, he says if there were no rewards, then we would be fools for living correctly. Jesus says that we should not expect rewards and punishments. Paul writes that you need to be afraid of punishment, but if you believe everything will be forgiven, Jesus teaches that we need to forgive. Paul calls anathema on the heads of those who do not follow his instructions. Jesus says the sons of God should not pay taxes. Paul calls for paying what is due, to whom to give, to whom rent, to whom fear, to whom honor. Almost all modern churches are built on the teachings of Paul, which hid the true teachings of Christ. And the closest people to the real teaching were the Russian people, where Christian sects persisted that did not accept the church version or, for example, the old believers, in my opinion, living much closer to the teachings of Christ than to the teachings of Paul. The true teaching of Christ has yet to be discovered, collected piece by piece, but its spirit is understandable anyway. Do no evil, love your neighbor. After all, this is not at all about priests and metropolitans, not about rituals and sacraments, but first of all about humanity and freedom. In our country, the letters of the cunning Jew Paul are recognized almost as a revelation of God himself. It was on the basis of the false teaching of Paul that a caste of slaves and masters, workers and bourgeoisie was formed. This made it possible to advance imaginary progress, flood the world with goods, and establish blatant injustice in the difference in income. The Old Testament should not have any special value for a Christian other than as a collection of stories about the adventures and sins of the Jewish people. So, as long as Paul's false Christianity is not separated from the true teachings of Christ, people will continue to lose faith, and the nations will not live a peaceful life. The madness that is happening in the world will only increase. Truly a diabolical plan, and it seems the world has not yet collapsed only because there are still people in the world who adhere to the true teachings of Christ. That's all for me. If you liked the video, then please subscribe to my channel and like, and discuss it in the comments.